This week, a special edition of Sneak Previews, looking back at movies that portray the assassination of John F. Kennedy, including controversial documentaries, dramatic reenactments, fictionalized versions of the story, and, of course, the much-debated Oliver Stone, Kevin Costner film J.F.K., all on this special edition of Sneak Previews.
The time is autumn, 1621. The place is Plymouth Plantation, an English colony in Massachusetts. This is a harvest feast, a Thanksgiving. To share the harvest, the Englishmen have invited their friends and neighbors, the Indians.
Oh, God!
For games and contests of skill.
Oh, dear God!
What is it? This is a day for laughter and rejoicing.
The president's
But
been
behind
shot!
the laughter is a year of memory.
The president's been shot!
By sharing these memories, we shall learn these phrases with words and warn you.
Listen. All of us who were alive in 1963 have our own memories of that fateful Friday, November 22nd, and how we heard the news. It's recreated so well in that scene from the recent movie Mermaids. And over the last 30 years, there have been a host of fascinating films that explore the Kennedy assassination and all of the conflicting theories about what really happened in Dallas. And we're going to take a look at some of the best of these movie titles, both documentaries and feature films, all available on home video on this special Sneak Previews. I'm Michael Medved.
And I'm Jeffrey Lyons. And the rarest commodity in any investigation of the murder of the 35th president is clear, uncontroverted facts. But several documentaries purport to sort out some of the complex occurrences, either confirming or disputing the findings of the Warren Commission, which said Oswald worked alone.
I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody has told me anything except that I'm accused of murdering a police chief.
Rusted Judgment, made by conspiracy proponent Mark Lane, was the first movie to dispute the Warren Commission. It used news footage of Oswald facing the most important question in the history of modern crime.
Did you kill the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet. The first thing I heard about was when the newspaper reporters in the hall asked me that question.
You have been.
Nobody said what?
Sir?
You have been.
Nobody said what? Okay, we ain't hear you.
Okay. What did you do in Russia? What did you hurt your eye?
A policeman hit me.
Then Lane interviewed eyewitnesses and found one who directly contradicted the so-called single bullet theory which sealed Oswald's guilt. This man, for instance, was asked if the same bullet hit both Kennedy and Connolly.
No, that Warren Commission is in error on that, because I was an eyewitness to that, and I know that the same bullet that hit President Kennedy did not hit Governor Connolly. The first bullet, the president slumped over, and Governor Connolly made his turn to the right and then back to the left. And that's when the second shot was fired and knocked him down in the floorboard. And it would have been impossible for him to turn had the bullet hit, the same bullet hit him that went through the president's neck.
And did you see the effect of the next bullet which struck President Kennedy?
I saw the effects of the next bullet that struck the president. Because it flipped him over almost on his stomach and the side of his head, and his head was laying on the edge of the seat. He was laying more on his stomach, and his foot was hanging out over the car, edge of the car, upside down.
Declassified, the plot to kill President Kennedy concentrates not on evidence, but rather on motives, in particular the possible involvement of the mob. And toward the end of this film, there's a little scene interview with a man who might have known a lot more than history has recorded.
Ruby gave one last interview to a local TV reporter. It was crudely recorded, but tantalizing.
The only thing I can say, what is your name, and I'll know how to... Harry Kendall. Harry Kendall. Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. true facts of what occurred, my motives. In other words, I'm the only person in the background that knows the truth.
Best Evidence focuses solely on what happened to the president's body. And through interviews with handlers in Dallas and Bethesda Naval Hospital, where the autopsy was performed, filmmaker David Lifton purports to show that somebody tampered with the corpse en route.
Plain shipping casket.
In the picture here, you can tell this is not a shipping casket. A shipping casket would be what they'd ship a body back from, say, Vietnam in. This couldn't be a shipping casket. This is a high-class casket here.
That was Aubrey Reich, who was in Dallas. I showed the same picture to Dennis David.
I'm showing you here some pictures taken at Love Field in Dallas, Texas. Was that the casket you saw taken in the back entrance from at the loading dock?
You're talking about the black ambulance?
Yeah, the black ambulance.
No. As I said, the one that we offloaded there was a standard government issue type plastic metal, a metal, gray metal box that obviously is a casket, but nothing, not with the side arms or the side rails and all this, just handles on the side. Now, this wasn't the one that we offloaded.
Paul, most people don't know what a body bag is, so I happen to get one, and I'd like to know if this is the kind of, this is a...
Typically, this is it. This is maybe not the model that we use, but as you see, it's got the zipper on it.
Yeah.
It's heavy plastic, gauge plastic, and typical body bag.
This is a typical body bag.
Typical body bag.
Is this the kind of, basically,
Basically, this is the way it looked.
Well, Aubrey, does this bear any resemblance to the mattress cover you used to line the coffin to keep the blood away from the bottom of the coffin?
No, sir. This one doesn't, no.
What is this?
This is what we call a crash bag, or a body bag, you could call it. We call them crash bags.
And mattress cover wouldn't look like this at all?
No, sir. There was a plastic similar to this, but mattress cover has no zipper.
And you didn't use a body bag for the president?
Sir. No way.
Absolutely no question about that?
No way.
How can you be certain?
I was there.
And you remember?
I remember picking him up. I was the one that had the blood on my shirt and everything from the body. If he'd been in a crash bag, you couldn't have got any blood on you because it's a sealed bag.
I told Reich about Paul O'Connor's account of opening a body bag.
Top to the bottom, and he had to unzip the zipper.
He didn't get one from us.
I've interviewed the people in Dallas who put the president's body inside the casket in Dallas. There was no body bag used. For your information, those people...
That sounds strange.
That sounds what?
Sounds strange to me.
Is there any possibility you're confused that it was anything but a body bag? Could you...
Well, a body bag, a mattress cover, if that's what they said they used, does not have a zipper down the middle of it.
Paul, they said they didn't use anything. They did not use a mattress cover. They said a mattress cover was used to keep blood off the bottom, but they didn't put him inside anything.
Well, between Parkland and Bethesda, he was placed in a body bag.
This video, Best Evidence, is fascinating viewing, but I think before people rent it, they ought to be prepared. It is very grisly with some very graphic detail, including showing you the actual autopsy photos of John Kennedy's corpse. And my other problem with it, which is a slight problem, is that I think that David Lifton, who's also written a best-selling book on this subject, in the video at least, could compete in an Olympic event called the conclusion jump, because he goes from proving, I think fairly well, that the body was moved from one casket to another, to the assumption, the conclusion, that somehow the wounds were altered surgically.
Well, other documentaries have purported to disprove his conclusion, but it's amazing. He gave his whole life. He's given his whole life to this one aspect of the Kennedy assassination. He changed his career. He became this filmmaker, namely what happened to the body and how somebody might have altered the wounds to make it look like an exit wound rather than an entry wound.
And there's the same kind of focus, though, on a different issue in Rush to Judgment. There, what Mark Lane does, and just a year after the assassination, which is remarkable, is he goes back and focuses on where did the shots come from. And it's very impressive because he finds literally dozens of witnesses who in a very plain, sort of ordinary fashion say, no, I heard the shots coming from the grassy knoll. It's very hard to just discount this, even though some of that testimony looks a bit rehearsed. And on the video, it's very hard to explain why all these people are recalling this that way.
And whether you're a proponent of the Warren Commission or not, what's astonishing from this video is that a lot of these people who might have had a lot to say about the assassination were never called in front of the Warren Commission. That famous man who was seen soon afterwards on television who had been holding his boy, who suddenly breaks down into tears, who was very close to the limousine, was never called. And that, to me, is the astonishing part of Rest of Judgment.
Well, that's interesting. You actually see him and see the historic TV footage right in that Mark Lane video. Declassified, which is also called The Plot to Kill President Kennedy, is a different thing altogether, because what it looks at is not the evidence, but the possible conspiracy. And it is fascinating. I think it's quite persuasive. It emphasizes the mafia-Cuban connection with some absolutely chilling sort of video showing Senator Jack Kennedy interviewing Jimmy Hoffa in a Senate committee hearing, and then implicating, of course, Hoffa in the assassination.
It also has an interview with Castro denying it, for whether you believe that or not. It has Jack Ruby, as you saw. It has all the whole complex myriad of things which went into the making, of course, of JFK, which sparked the reopening of this whole controversy, and it tries to sort them out. Sometimes it jumps to conclusions, but has a lot of footage I have never seen before. Well, aside from documentaries, Hollywood has used the Kennedy assassination as a basis for several movies, some with fictionalized characters that strain far afield, weaving complex, bizarre plots and scenarios. Winter Kill starred Jeff Bridges as the younger brother of a slain president who, several years after the assassination, discovers the rifle which a second gunman used to shoot his brother, hidden in a drain pipe in a warehouse.
But I got a contract for you. One of the biggest contracts ever handed out. Anyway, me?
And the complex mystery later depicts Eli Wallach, who portrays a nightclub owner named Joe Diamond. Get it? Here, he's getting his orders from an underworld figure, played by Ralph Meeker, about a special contract he's been ordered to carry out.
I can pay back? When you handle this hit, you'll be paying back.
A hit? Why me? There must be 200 mechanics around here who can make any hit better than me.
I told them. No good. Those guys aren't political.
I'm political?
You were in Cuba, very good friends with a certain minister.
I thought about you a lot, Game Boy.
You have a commie background in the FBI files.
Commie? I was out of Cuba 10 years before Castro.
Joe, what do you want from me? You were in Cuba.
This is crazy.
Anyways, you got to make the hit.
Who's the contract?
There are two. We've already taken care of the first one. You make the second hit. A kid named William Arnold.
I don't know. And then who's the first?
President Keegan.
Winter Kills has its moments, particularly when John Huston is on screen. He steals the movie. He plays the father of the slain president, obviously a character very loosely based on Joseph P. Kennedy, and Huston just eats up the role alive, steals the movie, but the movie is so bizarre and so far-fetched and so strange, even stranger than a lot of the true questions that have been raised about the assassination. I think it shows that in this particular case, the truth, or at least an attempt to find the truth, is more absorbing than any fiction.
Whatever the truth may be. Now, I will tell you, I've seen this movie twice in recent weeks, and a second viewing really clears up some of the ambiguities. There are lots of names. It does go far afield, but some of the performances are really bizarre and wonderful in a strange way. The original novel was written by Richard Condon, who also wrote Prizzi's Honor, and before that wrote The Manchurian Candidate, which had an eerie foretelling of the Kennedy assassination, filmed in 1962, which I think President Kennedy might even have seen. So there's a lot going on here just beneath the surface of the movie. This is a strange, very offbeat picture, sometimes difficult to follow, but in its own way, it has a place in all of this.
Well, of course, The Manchurian Candidate, it's a much better picture.
Oh, it's a great
starring
film.
Jack Kennedy's friend, Frank Sinatra, because they were good friends, and other films that have been inspired by the assassination. The Parallax View, there's a film called Flashpoint with Treat Williams that has elements of the assassination in it, but Winter Kills may be the most interesting of them, except for The Manchurian Candidate, which is pre-assassination. In any event, in addition to those movies that offered openly fictionalized versions of the events in Dallas, there have been many other films that use the real names and some real facts to present dramatic embellishments on what really happened. Now, the best of them, for my money, was a TV movie that's also been released on home video called The Trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. This is absorbing history of the what-if variety. What if Oswald had lived to stand trial for Kennedy's murder? Here, the accused assassin, well played by an actor named John Plachette, awaits the final verdict.
that has swirled about the crime of which he stands accused will very likely continue, whatever the final verdict. And despite streams of witnesses, weeks of cross-examination, his own testimony from the stand, Oswald himself continues in many ways to remain an enigma to his family, acquaintances, psychiatric experts, and perhaps even to himself. Some of Oswald's co-workers in the book depository where he was employed on the day of the assassination seem to have thought of him as intense and introspective, but others recall him as being suddenly and unexpectedly voluble.
Why, because you think so?
All who knew him, it seems clear, found him in some way...
Taps, turn it off.
24-year-old Texas youth, prior to this event, had been quite unremarkable. Now finds himself in focus.
Now forget it. Let him talk. Free speech, that's what this country's all about, isn't it?
Less convincing was Executive Action, once again based on the conspiracy theories of Mark Lane. Robert Ryan, Burt Lancaster, and Will Geer played wealthy right-wing extremists with CIA connections who've decided that they must do something, anything, to stop John F. Kennedy. We apologize for the Japanese subtitles, which appear on the laser disc version, but the home video version, we can assure you, is available without them.
Called from El Paso. Governor Connolly has just left the president. And they made a private agreement that he will make a political pilgrimage to Texas to woo votes, probably in the fall.
Oh, there ought to be a better way of settling things like this. Have you researched the man's private history?
Thoroughly.
Letters in the State Department.
Harold, if you forgive me, we're way ahead of you. If we could find some way to discredit him, believe me, we'd have done it by now. Gentlemen, the hour's getting late.
No, I'm sorry, gentlemen, I'm still unconvinced. Oh, I agree with you that the welfare of this country is worth any man's life, even the president's. My advice, for what it's worth to you, is wait.
Well, I think the bizarre appearance of those Japanese subtitles on the Laserdisc copy might provoke a whole conspiracy controversy of its own. They turn out to be one of the more interesting aspects of this movie, which is rather plotting. Shows a lot of my favorite actors at that time, Burt Lancaster, Will Geer, Robert Ryan, but going through the motions of a rather plotting screenplay which doesn't break any new grounds and simply puts forth its hypothesis and lets the actors do the rest.
Well, and they don't do very much. I mean, that's why the picture doesn't work. There are a lot of problems with it. I mean, I think the main reason to see Executive Action is to see the recreations and how cheesy they are, and you then get to appreciate some of the real artistry in JFK. And also, the movie shows, and even that scene that we showed shows, I think, one of the enormous problems with these big conspiracy theories about some kind of governmental conspiracy, because as Burt Lancaster says there, he says, if we had any other way to discredit him, we would have. Well, there were people in the government who knew about John Kennedy's bedroom escapades and some of his peccadillos, and they could have stopped him, ruined his political career by releasing that, but instead we're led to believe that rather than doing that, they do something much more risky and messy, which is kill him.
You mentioned the recreation of the assassination. I don't think it's done well either in the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. That's the weakest point of the film. However, having said that, I will say that this made-for-TV movie, which is available again on video, does give 3 dimensions to Oswald by spending a lot of its time showing what he might have done in Moscow, his domestic life, how he apparently did love his family. So he's not just this enigma that we've seen in such precious few newsreel photographs, and to that extent, I applaud it.
Well, to some extent, he comes across as a human being, and I like the film for that. I liked it for other reasons, too. I think of all the movies that have been made trying to explore the possibility of a conspiracy, this is the most balanced. It goes to some lengths to show that, well, the Warren Commission giving that side of view, and also the side of view that alleges a conspiracy.
And it doesn't exploit the hysteria either, as it so easily might have.
No, not at all, and it does something else interesting, which is it suggests that even if Lee Oswald had lived and stood trial, there still would be unanswered questions. Well, of all the movies that try to take us behind the scenes in the alleged conspiracy to kill Kennedy, none of them is as powerful or as cleverly crafted as Oliver Stone's JFK, which is why it's provoked such passionate reaction, both pro and con.
Did you shoot the president?
I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir. They have taken me in because of the fact I have lived in the Soviet Union. I'm just a patsy.
God, he sure looks like a creep.
In this scene, shortly after the killing, New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison, played by Kevin Costner, watches TV with his family and gets his first glimpse of the accused assassin. Watch how masterfully director Stone and British actor Gary Oldman, who plays Oswald, have recreated the historic footage we saw earlier. Watch carefully later in this press conference, where an answer is provided by an odd figure who eventually plays a big role in the drama.
Someone to come forward to give me a legal assistance.
Were you ever in the pre-Cuba movement or whatever that's called?
Fair play for Cuba Committee.
What did you do in Russia? And why have your eyes?
Seems pretty cool to me for a man under pressure like that.
A policeman hit me.
That, of course, was Brian Doyle Murray, who played Jack Ruby, who supposedly, according to JFK, was at that press conference. And, you know, you used the word passionate and debate and pros and cons. I remember you calling this picture full of holes, and you're absolutely right. I saw it a second time, even though I might maybe on a different side of the controversy. It really is a picture that should be seen several times because it raises so many questions. It has a lot of flaws in them, some of them shocking, some of them shameful, but it is a gripping, thrilling, political movie, a whodunit that I think is of the first order.
It's extremely well made, there's no question about it, but I've compared it in the past, and I will again, to Birth of a Nation, which is a brilliant achievement. It's great artistry, but Birth of a Nation is basically an evil film. It makes you root for the
Well, that's a racist film. That's a racist. This is not a racist film.
But this film is just as irresponsible in the way that it distorts history. I mean, it makes Jim Garrison into somebody that he wasn't. It doesn't even answer the basic question about what was Clay Shaw's connection with the conspiracy, which Jim Garrison never answered. I think it's been pointed out that the film runs 3 times longer than it took the jury to acquit Clay Shaw in the trial that is dramatized in this movie.
The only thing I think Stone mistakenly did was to assume that people would go in here knowing the truth as we know it about the assassination, and those of us who lived through it did. 45% of the people who are alive today, however, were not alive when the president was murdered, and that is a danger to go in there and think these are the facts as they are. He condensed figures, he condensed characters, but on the level of drama, Michael, on the level of drama, it works wonderfully.
No question about it, but he distorts not only Jim Garrison, he distorts John Kennedy, and he distorts the historical record, making John Kennedy into a peacenik who's about to withdraw us from Vietnam when the testimony of Robert Kennedy and of all of Kennedy's advisors who stayed and made the war is quite different from what Oliver Stone claims to know.
Even though you voted no on the movie and I voted yes, you still have to admit that since it's become such a cause célèbre that you think people should see it too. Will you agree with me on that?
I'm not sure that people should see it unless they're prepared to do the research they need to correct the misimpressions. Well, though JFK is certainly the most gripping and the most controversial of all the movies on the Kennedy assassination, it is hardly Hollywood's last word on the subject. For instance, there's an eagerly awaited upcoming film called Ruby, starring that fine actor Danny Aiello as the man who shot Oswald, Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Your host, Jack Ruby. Welcome once again to the Carousel Club here in Dallas, Texas. The place is full of hoods. These is businessmen, old friends who come out to support my club.
Nicky the Shoe from Cleveland, San Giancana from Chicago, Santos Alicante from New Orleans.
Something big going on? Could be, Jack. And it could concern you. You're in over your head. Isn't that where you always wanted me to be?
You represent Dallas, Jack.
Texas is the reliable place. And where is better in this country than Dallas?
What do you think you're dealing with?
You ever see anything this pretty? Only one outfit comes up with something like that. Biggest picture from. They do stuff that don't make no kind of sense, so that if you ever come to squeal on them, you don't make no sense neither. What do you people want from me?
We just want you to do your duty for your country, Jack.
You think I don't know what happens if someone does a hit like this? He never gets off the boat on the way home.
You need crossfire, 3 or 4 guns, high-power rifles, and lots of tall buildings. You need yourself a patsy. If they're going to catch someone, they catch the patsy.
Funny thing about life, Jack, you only get one shot.
You better have a way to decide who's going to die. You or the guy giving the contract, because it's going to be one of the 2 of you.
What's going on with the girl, Jack?
They're bringing her in to meet the president.
The government of the United States has a secret policy with organized crime. They killed the President of the United States!
We should say, Michael, that we haven't yet seen Ruby, but Danny Aiello's one of my favorite actors, so I'm expecting good things from it. It's certainly not the only movie that's coming from Hollywood about the subject. Libra, based on the book about Lee Harvey Oswald, is another one. And you can be sure with the success and the controversy swirling around JFK, there'll be many, many more movies on the subject.
I'm sure you're right about that. And the only concern that I have is that with all of this emphasis on all the conspiracies, not only does it increase paranoia, but it focuses on the assassination, which I think makes people, particularly younger people who weren't alive when Kennedy was president, look back on John Kennedy as a corpse, as somebody who's there in autopsy photos. And I think it's very important that people balance that with some recollection of what this guy was like when he was alive. And he was magic in front of the camera. People should go back and rent a video called 4 Days in November that David Wolper did that actually showed everything that Kennedy did on the Thursday and Friday before the assassination.
Also, Gregory Peck narrates a very good one called Years of Lightning, Day of Drums. And, you know, I attended a Kennedy press conference as the crack reporter from my high school newspaper. And watching all this...
I was at rallies that he spoke twice. I actually touched his hand.
Well, watching all this the past couple of weeks, getting ready for this show, that came to mind, I must say, as much as the tragedy of Dallas. But some of these videos, good and bad, and there are some sleazy ones out there, too, they ought to be avoided. It really brings back that horrible time and makes you miss him and wonder what the world would have been like had he lived.
But I think the problem is it also just fuels tremendous paranoia, makes people unduly cynical, again, because none of these questions can be answered.
Yeah.
It's like a fever swamp. The more you watch, the more questions you have, and I think it can be a little bit of a sickness if carried too far. Well, now to summarize some of the titles that we did review this week, of course, if you're interested in this subject, you'll probably go out and see JFK. But beyond that, I'd also urge you to see The Trial of Lee Harvey Oswald. This is an utterly absorbing what-if drama that tries, more than any other film, I think, to present both sides of the issue, balancing the Warren Commission's findings with the suspicions of a wider conspiracy. And of the pro-conspiracy movies, the most powerful and persuasive, for my money, the one that still poses the most haunting questions, is Mark Lane's 1964 documentary, Rush to Judgment, where the fresh recollections of a host of ordinary people are hard to explain away.
While I share Michael's recommendations, I was also fascinated by Declassified, The Plot to Kill President Kennedy, which focuses on the Mafia-Cuban connection. I also recommend, in its strange way, the bizarre fantasy Winter Kills, because of its fine performances and its way out, almost nonsensical conspiracy theories, which makes even Oliver Stone's JFK seem restrained and understated by comparison.
So join us next week when we'll be back reviewing all the big new movies in town. I'm Michael Medved.
And I'm Jeffrey Lyons, and until then on Sneak Previews, don't forget to save us the aisle seats.